ABC Kinderteach presents Barkis, written and illustrated by Claire Turley Newberry. Barkis. James' 9th birthday had been fun. Just being 9 years old at last was something. Besides all the excitement of opening gifts, there was a young chemist set, which might look a bit like this. From his father, a sweater from his mother, a silver dollar from his grandma, and a book about Indians from Nell Jean, his sister, who was 10 and a half and very fond of, or liked, reading. Then, too, there was the lovely cake his mother had baked for him, with pink icing on it and happy birthday in green squiggles across the top. So James should have been happy, and he was, really, only he felt a little sad too, the way you cannot help feeling when you have had all your gifts and it is nearly bedtime, and you know you won't have another birthday for a whole long year. He sighed as he fingered the big round dollar in his pocket. Once more he raised the lid of his young chemist's set to admire its rows of mysterious, not sure what they were, little bottles. He would have liked to see the pictures in his new book, too, but Nell Jean was already reading that, curled up in an armchair with Edward, her striped cat, purring on her shoulder. So his sister gives him a book, but then she's the one who's reading it first. Suddenly, a car stopped in front of the house. A loud beep, beep, beep sent Edward scampering, going quickly because of fear, under the sofa. "It's Uncle Jimmy!" shouted James, and he raced out of the house. When he reached the car, his uncle was lifting a large box out of the back seat. I wonder if that could be Barkis. It was a brown pasteboard, like a cereal box, carton tied with heavy cord, thick string, and there were holes about as big as a lead pencil punched here and there in its sides. "What is it, Uncle Jimmy? What is it?" begged James. "Is it for me? Is it, Uncle Jimmy?" "I bet it is. It's his birthday." "You just wait and see," laughed his uncle. He carried the box into the house and set it on the floor. Then he said, "Happy birthday, James. Go ahead, open it." The whole family gathered round to see what was in the box, all except Edward, who felt safer watching from under the sofa. Even Nell Jean put down James's book and came to see what Uncle Jimmy had brought. James frowned impatiently, looking serious, as he got his jackknife out of his pocket. A jackknife might look like this, and it's typically one that has blades that fold in. And tugged open a blade. He sawed through the heavy cords, then quickly lifted the flaps of the carton and looked inside. What he saw was so wonderful that he simply stared. In the bottom of the box, peering anxiously, looking closely in a nervous way, up at him sat a small, solemn, and serious-looking brown puppy. His short tail began to wag when he saw James, but his dark eyes remained anxious and pleading. Like, "Please, I'm begging." "Boy," breathed James, and he picked up the puppy and hugged him close. The puppy lay quite still at first while James softly stroked his plushy, very soft back and his small, sleek, smooth and shiny head. But pretty soon he began to poke his cold nose into James's neck, making happy snuffling or sniffing noises. That puppy seems to be pretty happy to be there. "He likes me, Daddy, he really does," cried James joyfully. "He's snoofing," heavy sniffing, "in my neck like anything. Ooh, he tickles." His name is Barkis, beamed Uncle Jimmy, and he's a Cocker Spaniel. And this is what a Cocker Spaniel really looks like. Well, he sure is a swell dog, said James, turning his face to escape the puppy's wet tongue. Thanks, Uncle Jimmy. Thanks an awful lot. He's just darling, Uncle Jimmy, cried Nell Jean, letting Barkis nibble her fingertips with his little sharp teeth. Just feel how soft his ears are, Mama, and look, they're naturally curly. Oh, I just love him. Is he part mine, Uncle Jimmy? No, yelled James, but before his uncle could answer, he's all mine, isn't he, Uncle Jimmy? He's my own birthday dog, isn't he? Uncle Jimmy looked startled, suddenly surprised. Why, yes, of course, he said uneasily in an uncomfortable way. But you will have to share him with your sister, won't you, James? Of course he will, James' father said heartily in a loud and happy way. You want Nell Jean to play with the puppy too, don't you, son? A stubborn, not wanting to do something, look had come into James's face. Nell Jean's already got Edward, he muttered sulkily, which means in a quiet, grouchy way, and she never would let me have any of him, so why do I have to give her part of my own birthday dog? It's not fair, said James darkly in a grouchy way. Children, said their mother, what will Uncle Jimmy think of you? Come now, bring the puppy into the kitchen and we'll feed him. Oh, that reminds me, said Uncle Jimmy. You must always feed Barkis out of a cup, not a flat dish, or his naturally curly ears will drag in his dinner. That made the children laugh. In the kitchen, their mother mixed some shredded wheat and milk in a cup and set it on the floor, while the family crowded round to watch Barkis eat. And how Barkis did eat! He had no table manners whatsoever at all. With his short legs braced wide apart, which means spread wide apart so he wouldn't fall, he lapped, slurped up, fast and noisily. And when he reached the bottom of the cup, he licked it so hard that he pushed it all around over the linoleum, which might look like this. It's flooring that looks a little bit plasticky. At this time, Edward had been hiding under the sofa, so that's the cat. But seeing Barkis eat made him feel hungry too. He crept cautiously from his hiding place and tiptoed toward the puppy, his ears pricked forward, lifted to hear better, his whiskers quivering, shaking often from being afraid, and his round eyes gleaming, shining brightly with excitement. Barkis, having given the cup one last lick, turned and saw him. For a moment he stood still, his short tail wagging doubtfully, which means in an unsure or not sure way, and his babyish forehead wrinkled up in a puzzled frown, like he's like, I don't know what this cat wants from me. Then the hairs bristled, stood straight up along his little back, and he growled under his breath. Suddenly he barked, "Ruff!" and came down playfully on his elbows with his hind legs still standing up. Edward sat down and eyed him scornfully in a mean way. So Barkis thinks he's going to be friends with the cat, but the cat's like, you better leave me alone. "Ruff!" said Barkis more bravely this time, and he gave a little bounce and came down again on his elbows, just a trifle, a little bit closer. Edward's ears flattened, which usually means the cat's going to be mad, and his kitten tail slowly fluffed out till it looked like a tiny fir tree. Another thing that means he's not very happy. Kind of a hissing. He remarked insultingly in a mean and nasty way. But now Barkis was feeling very brave indeed. He gave a third ruff and bounced again. Edward's paw shot out. "Yipe!" squealed Marcus in terror, feeling very scared. backing away in a hurry, for the kitten's sharp claws had scratched his soft baby nose. Well, that's not very nice, but I think the kitten Edward is also a bit scared. "Mama," cried James, "look what that old kitten did. He ought to be ashamed. Feel bad about something it did." "Never mind," said his mother soothingly, in a way that makes you feel better. "Barkis and Edward will be good friends when they know each other better. And now, you children must go to bed." So James and Nell Jean each gave Barkis a last lingering, lasting for a long time, hug, and walked in a tired way, slowly up the stairs. When they were in their beds, Nell Jean called to her brother from across the hall. "Oh, James." "What?" "James, listen," she said coaxingly, trying to get someone to do something without being pushy. "How would you like to trade half of Barkis for half of Edward, okay?" "No," roared her brother indignantly, feeling mad about being treated badly. "Oh, please, James," she begged. "Why not?" "No, sir," said James fiercely, with a lot of feeling. "Why should I want a part of your old kitten when I've got a swell new dog all to myself? Dogs are better than cats anyhow. Everybody knows that." "They are not." "Sure they are. Cats are dumb. Cats can't do tricks the way dogs can." "They could if they wanted to," cried Nell Jean hotly. "They just don't want to, so there." "That's what you say," said Mean Things loudly, her brother. "Well, it's true," said in a serious way, Nell Jean, close to tears. "Cats are about 1,000,000 times better than dogs any day." "Ah, they are not." "They are too." "They are not." "Are too." "Are not." "Aren't." There was a swift step in the hall, and both children fell silent. Uh-oh, are they going to get into trouble? "You children must go right to sleep now," said their mother, and she kissed them each good night. Then she closed the doors between their 2 rooms and went back downstairs. "All the same, dogs are better than cats. Everybody knows that," said quietly James as he fell asleep. "I don't care," sobbed Nell Jean angrily. "I'd rather have Edward than all the old puppies in the whole world. I hate dogs." And burying in deep, her nose in the pillow, she cried herself to sleep. She seems to be mad and sad, and he does too. When James came in from school the next day, Barkis met him at the door, wagging happily, and bouncing up to lick at his bare knees. He was too frisky, full of energy, to be petted, however, and when James tried to catch him, he just barked saucily in a rude way, kind of a loud way, and ran quickly out of reach. With a gleeful whoop, a happy yell, James was after him, and they chased each other merrily or happily around the room. Then James stumbled over a scuffed-up rug, which might look like that, so it's a little bit bent up in the middle, and fell to the floor in a laughing heap. At once Barkis was on top of him, licking his face, nipping his ears, and tugging at his clothes and hair, all the while growling delightedly. "You win," gasped James. He shook the puppy loose and flushed. His face had turned red. And tousled, messed up his hair, struggled to his feet. "You wait here, Barkis," he said. "I'm going upstairs to get my ball." So he's going to go up and get a ball so maybe they can play some more. He remembered seeing the ball under his bed that very morning, but it wasn't there now. His mother had picked it up and put it in the toy box where it belonged. And as he looked everywhere else first, he did not find it for some time. Nell Jean had come in quietly while James and the puppy were playing and had settled herself by the window to read. She had made up her mind to pay no attention to mean old James and his puppy. So, when little Barkis, feeling lonely with James upstairs, nibbled softly at her shoelace, she just drew her feet up haughtily, in an unfriendly way like you're better than them, beneath her and went on reading. Barkis watched her hopefully for a moment, his head on one side, his eyes wistful, wanting something. But she did not look up, so he trotted, moving a little faster than a walk, to the screen door and stared out, sniffing the fresh air. He put them up, his forepaws, or his front paws, against the door, and to his surprise, it swung slowly open with him, and he landed on all fours on the porch. Nell Jean glanced up, looked at quickly. When she heard the door slam, she wondered if Barkis was old enough to be outdoors by himself. Then she scowled, looked mad or grouchy. "Let James take care of his own old dog," she thought spitefully in a mean way, and she tried to go on reading. Barkis sniffed the air eagerly with a lot of excitement. Trotting to the edge of the porch steps, he peered or looked over. They must have looked very steep to him, for he pattered, run with a quick, light step, back and forth at the top, whimpering softly. Presently he started down very slowly. Plop, 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 his long ears just brushing each step as he went down to it. At last he reached the cement walk at the bottom, and with a happy little bark he scampered out on the lawn and rolled over and over in the grass. In spite of herself, Nell Jean glanced out of the window just in time to see him scramble, get up in a clumsy way, to his feet, shake his ears, and jog gaily or happily toward the street. She scowled again and bent her gaze upon the book, but it was no use. She just could not read it. She looked out again, and this time no puppy was in sight, nothing but the empty lawn and the bare sidewalk, and beyond it the tall green grass that grew along the creek. Oh, I hope the dog doesn't get in the water. Nell Jean gave a little shriek, a squeaky scream, and, flinging down her book, ran out of the house. She clattered down the steps, and a moment later was kneeling beside the creek, pulling a wet and frightened puppy out of the icy water. I hope Barkis is going to be okay. "Mama! Mama!" she screamed as she rushed back into the house with Barkis dripping and shivering in her arms. "Why, what on earth?" began her mother, hurrying to meet her. "He fell in the creek, Mama," panted Nell Jean as her brother, appearing from above with the ball in his hand, stared at Barkis open mouthed. "In that cold water?" cried their mother in dismay, unhappy because something unexpected happened. Taking the shivering puppy, "We must get him warm quickly before he catches cold. James, you light the gas heater. Quick, Nell Jean, you run out in the hall and get me your old sweater." Already she was briskly or quickly rubbing the wet puppy with a bath towel, and when the sweater was brought, she wrapped him all up in it so that nothing but his little square muzzle could be seen, and a muzzle is the snout or part of the face that sticks out like the nose and mouth of a dog. Then, drawing up a chair, she held him on her lap before the roaring gas fire. "Will he get sick, Mama?" demanded James anxiously. "I didn't know it hurt puppies to get wet." "It wouldn't hurt an older puppy," said his mother, "but Barkis is just a baby. He shouldn't even have been bathed for another month. But we'll hope he's all right." And look, he's all bundled up in this picture. "Would he get awful sick, Mama?" quavered Nell Jean, said in a shaky voice. Would he get really awful sick?" "We'll hope not, dear," said her mother. Poor little fella. He's shivering terribly. James, run and get me your bathrobe. Now, Jean, you go and fill the hot water bottle. There's hot water in the tea kettle, which looks like this. Soon Barkis had James' woolly bathrobe wrapped about him on top of Nell Jean's old sweater and a hot water bottle besides. But he went on shivering just the same. He held very still and good, and did not make a sound, but his soft dark eyes, peering out at them, looking so miserable, very unhappy or uncomfortable, that Nell Jean began to cry. If Barkis dies, it will all be my fault, she thought wretchedly, feeling very bad. After what seemed a long time, the mother looked up and smiled. He's not shivering any more, and he's sound asleep, she said cheerfully. I do believe he's going to be all right, but we must keep him wrapped up until he's entirely dry. Nell Jean, you hold him. I must get dinner. So Nell Jean held Barkis tenderly, in a very nice way, while James, sitting on the floor beside her, clasped or held tightly one of his pudgy, slightly fat, damp paws. By the time their father came home to dinner, Barkis was all dry, and to the joy of everyone, when he was finally unwrapped, he was just as good as new. If possible, he was even livelier than before, and the children had a glorious or wonderful evening romping, playing with a lot of energy, with him. That night, when they were in bed, James called to his sister, Nell Jean. What? Say, listen, Nell Jean, if you still want to trade half of Edward for half of Barkis, I guess it's okay. Gosh, you saved his life, practically, in a way. I mean, if it hadn't been for you, he might have got drowned or something. Nell Jean did not answer for a moment. Then she said bravely, Of course I want to trade, only I guess you won't if I tell you something. What? Well, confessed, tell someone that you did something bad, his sister. You see, it was my fault he fell in the creek, because I saw him go outdoors, and I didn't stop him or anything. I didn't think about the creek. Oh, said James. Well, anyway, he said gruffly in a grouchy voice, you did rescue him, so I guess it's still okay. Anyway, I like Edward an awful lot, too. Nell Jean was so overcome, felt very surprised by his generosity, giving more than she expected, that she could not speak for a few moments. Then she said humbly, not in a proud way, Look, James, I'll tell you what let's do. I guess Barkis really ought to be mostly yours on account of your birthday and everything. So let's have it this way. Barkis can be partly mine, but mostly yours. And Edward can be partly yours, but mostly mine, okay? Okay, cried James.